When I first drove into Willow Pines, it looked like something out of a home and garden magazine, a watercolor painting of suburban perfection. Rows of pristine two-story homes lined the gently curving streets, each with identical mailboxes, manicured lawns, and just enough variation in pastel siding to pretend we weren't living in a manufactured utopia. The gates opened with a soft buzz as I entered, the guard giving me a quick nod and a clipboard wave. I was officially the new owner of Lot 47. It was supposed to be a fresh start. After losing Richard, my husband of 32 years, I couldn't bear to stay in our old house. Every floorboard creak sounded like his footsteps. The silence was unbearable. My therapist suggested a change of scenery, something quieter, simpler. And Willow Pines was both of those things, at least on the surface. Widows got a discount on HOA fees, apparently. Community-focused, they said, secure, peaceful. I should have known anything with that many American flags and solar-powered garden gnomes was hiding something. The only part of my life that hadn't changed was my cats. Beatrix, Tinsel, Edgar, Momo, Clove, and Taffy. They were my babies. Each one with their own quirks. Edgar insisted on drinking from the bathroom sink, Tinsel only sat on books with red covers, and Momo had an unfortunate fascination with shoelaces. They weren't just pets. They were family. When Richard got sick, it was Clove who never left his side. When he passed, it was Taffy who cried with me on the couch. I wasn't about to give them up. My realtor mentioned some pet restrictions, but breezed past the details. No one enforces that stuff unless you're a jerk, she'd laughed. Besides, your cats stay indoors, right? Well, mostly. They were all fixed, chipped, vaccinated, and wore little bells that jingled like wind chimes. They came and went through the cat door on the back patio. They were neighborhood celebrities within a week, lounging on porches, napping under hedges, occasionally performing synchronized bird-watching from a rooftop ledge. A few of the older residents even left out saucers of cream or treats. Better than rats, I heard one woman mutter approvingly. But not everyone was enchanted. The first letter came 3 weeks after move-in. It was printed in Comic Sans, tucked into my mailbox like a passive-aggressive love note. The header read, Notice of HOA violation. Pet policy infraction. Per Willow Pines Residential Covenant 4.2.1b, residents may not house more than two pets per household. You are currently in violation of this policy. Please reduce the number of resident animals within 10 business days to avoid penalties. It was signed, of course, by Gregory Tops, HOA president, the man who wore a Bluetooth headset, even when he wasn't on a call, who patrolled the sidewalks in a neon safety vest like he was guarding a military base instead of monitoring garbage bins. I stared at the paper, then reread it out loud. Reduce the number of animals sounded like something a dictator would say before a purge. I could practically hear his nasally voice. The feline menace must be neutralized for the glory of Willow Pines. I tried to be reasonable. Really. I showed up at the next HOA meeting, homemade banana bread in hand like a peace offering. Gregory didn't touch it. Instead, he gave me that thin-lipped grimace people wear when they're trying to look polite but think you're beneath them. We can't make exceptions, he said, without even making eye contact. If we let you have 6 cats, what's to stop someone else from bringing in a whole menagerie? We'd have a zoo on our hands. I almost asked him how many animals he thought it took to make a zoo, but I bit my tongue. The other board members, Marla, who knitted during the meeting, and Jeff, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, didn't say a word. No one voted. Gregory simply tapped his gavel like he was a judge in some low-budget courtroom drama. Violation stands, he declared. The banana bread went untouched. I considered fighting it legally. I even pulled up the full HOA bylaws. The pet clause was real, buried between clauses about flag size restrictions and holiday light duration limits, but no one had enforced it in years. There were at least 3 households with 3 dogs, including one Great Dane that routinely pooped on the sidewalk like it owned the place. When I asked Gregory about it, he shrugged. "We can't monitor everyone," he said deadpan, "but we do respond to complaints." So someone had complained. That night, I sat on the porch with Edgar in my lap, watching the sprinklers arc across the neighbor's yard. The air smelled like wet pavement and jasmine. My house was quiet. Peaceful. But a deep, slow-burning anger curled up in my chest like a sleeping dragon. Not just for me, but for the 6 little lives they wanted me to erase like a clerical error. "This place doesn't know who it's messing with," I muttered, scratching behind Edgar's ears. He purred like a tiny engine. Somewhere across the street, a sprinkler broke mid-cycle and started geysering into the sky. I took a sip of wine and smiled. The second letter arrived 3 days after the HOA meeting. This time it was printed on official Willow Pines letterhead, if you could call a faded acorn logo, and a generic serif font official. It had the smell of smug toner and expired authority. Notice of second violation. Immediate action required. As of April 7th, your household remains non-compliant with Covenant 4.2.1b. Per escalation protocols, you are now subject to a fine of $100 per additional animal per week until the number of pets is brought into compliance. Failure to resolve this matter may result in further legal action, including but not limited to forced rehoming, lien placement, and community review hearings. It was signed again by Gregory Tops, this time in blue ink, like he wanted to personally flavor the bile with bureaucracy. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the envelope. Forced rehoming? What was he going to do? Break into my house with a butterfly net and chase Tinsel under the couch? The fine started the following Monday. A red envelope was taped to my door with a $400 balance due. I ignored it. The next one included a photo of Momo lounging under a mailbox like he paid rent there. Documented evidence, the note said. That's when the neighbors started whispering. At first, it was small things. Miss Lynn from 2 houses down stopped me while I was walking to my mailbox. She leaned in like we were exchanging state secrets. "Gregory's little warpath is ridiculous," she hissed. "I saw Clove chase a rat the size of a loaf of bread behind the dumpsters last week. HOA should be thanking you." Turns out, Clove wasn't the only one doing pest control. Willow Pines had a rat problem, and my cats were the only reason it hadn't exploded. A few streets over, the trash bins near the clubhouse overflowed regularly. The HOA had cut back on collection to save money, and the rats, always the opportunists, moved in like it was an Airbnb with a cheese buffet. The irony? While Gregory was busy threatening me with legal rehoming, half the board had rodent droppings in their garages. I started documenting everything. Overflowing trash, rats scuttling across lawns, cats catching them and leaving their proud little corpses like offerings on welcome mats. I kept receipts, time-stamped photos. One video of Taffy heroically leaping into a recycling bin and emerging with a squirming tail between her teeth. But the real shift started when Gregory upped the ante. One morning, I found a large yellow sign staked into my yard. "This property is an active violation of HOA policy." It looked like a for-sale sign's angry cousin. The letters screamed in blocky caps. The neighbors stared as they walked by, some shaking their heads, others giving me sympathetic waves. I yanked it out and flung it across my lawn like a javelin. Tinsel perched on the porch railing and gave it a slow blink of approval. But something shifted after that. The people who supported the HOA's crackdown, few and far between, but vocal, started having bad luck, mild inconveniences, an odd pattern of tiny misfortunes. Mrs. Caldwell, who loudly referred to my cats as disease carriers at the last HOA cookout, had her entire sprinkler system malfunction. It soaked her roses for 3 hours before she noticed, drowning half her front garden. The Millers, who once complained that Momo looked at their baby funny, had 3 Amazon packages go mysteriously missing. Only their packages. No one else on the block reported theft. Then Jason. Jason lived next door, one of those tech guys who worked from home and liked to remind you that he ran things on Pacific time. Tall, sarcastic, borderline nocturnal. He told me, politely but bluntly, that he didn't like cats. "I've got allergies," he'd said, "and I don't trust anything that stares at the wall for 10 minutes without blinking." But when the oddities started, Jason took it personally. "Look," he said one evening, cornering me near the mailboxes, "I'm not saying your cats are evil or whatever, but someone's digging up my tulips, and it started right after you got that sign." I raised an eyebrow. So naturally, the most logical explanation is cat vengeance? He hesitated. "They've been acting weird." "Weirder than usual?" "I caught Bite, one of the strays that hangs around here, just sitting in my driveway, staring at my ring cam. For 25 minutes. I shrugged. "Maybe she likes being on camera." Jason grumbled and stormed off. That night, he installed a motion-sensitive wildlife cam facing my yard. And that's when things really got weird. He showed up the next day looking pale and rattled. He held up a tablet with the footage, and I noticed immediately that his hands were shaking. "I thought you were joking," he said. "But Sabrina, they're not normal." The video started simply enough. Clove, Momo, and Beatrix slowly emerging from the shadows, tails flicking like metronomes. Then the others joined. They formed a circle on the lawn, literally a perfect circle, each cat sitting exactly equidistant from the others. They stared upward. No meowing, no movement. Just a slow, synchronized head tilt toward the moon. But the part that got me? The audio. A faint, distorted whisper layered underneath the footage. Like whined through dead leaves. It was barely audible, but Jason had enhanced it, tech guy tricks, and played it back through a speaker. "Do not touch the keeper." My blood went cold. Jason turned to me. "What the hell is the keeper?" I didn't answer right away. I was still watching the video loop. My cats, my sweet, goofy babies, sat like statues, eyes glowing ever so slightly, completely still. "I think," I said slowly, "it's me. You ever get the feeling you're not alone, even when you are?" That's how my house started to feel. Not haunted exactly, just watched. Like something was waiting for me to notice it. The air got heavier after dark. The cats, once scatterbrained little furballs chasing reflections and bugs, had become unnervingly coordinated. They moved like a team, a unit. Jason stopped making jokes. After the Midnight Circle video, he refused to leave his porch without pepper spray. He kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe it's like pheromones or radiation. Maybe there's something in the water supply. But he kept the cam running, and the footage kept getting stranger. One clip showed Momo pacing figure eights around Jason's flower pots for 45 minutes. Another caught Beatrix tapping her paw exactly 9 times on his doormat at 3:17 a.m. every single night for a week. I told him to just offer them cream like Miss Lynn did. He wasn't amused. Meanwhile, Gregory Tops was doubling down. A week after the circle footage, I received a certified letter, hand-delivered by Gregory himself. I watched him from the window as he strutted up the walkway like a parking inspector with a badge. His expression said, "I've got you now." I didn't open the door. I didn't need to. My cats were already lined up on the inside windowsill, all 6 of them. sitting shoulder to shoulder, tails flicking in unison. Gregory hesitated when he saw them. For just a moment. Then he shoved the envelope into the mailbox, turned on his heel, and marched away like a man pretending he hadn't just felt a tremor under his feet. I waited until he was gone before I opened the letter. It was a final notice of non-compliance, this time citing not just the pet clause, but suspected retaliation and intimidation involving community members and property. Apparently, someone had accused Clove of scratching their Audi. Clove hadn't left the couch that day. I had time-stamped photos to prove it. I should have been angry. But I wasn't. I was done playing defense. So I made a decision. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for a Thursday. I went. Not with banana bread this time, but with a folder thick enough to be a phone book. Inside were printouts, timestamps of my cats catching rats, reports from pest control contractors showing rodent activity increasing in every home except mine, emails from neighbors who quietly supported me, and, of course, Jason's footage. I waited in the back while the board droned on about lawn edging and festive lighting durations. Then Gregory opened the floor for community concerns. His voice tightened when he saw me stand. "Ms. Rose," he said, "we've already addressed your—" "I have new evidence," I said calmly. "And several of your own residents are experiencing a little plague problem. I thought you might want to hear how I've been keeping it under control." I laid the folder down like a bomb. For the first time, Gregory shut up. I flipped through the photos, the pest control invoices, the time-stamped footage. I played the audio clip on a portable speaker. The room went still. "Do not touch the keeper." The words made Marla drop her knitting needles. Jeff visibly swallowed. "You're allowing a rule to endanger this entire community," I said, voice steady but sharp. "You want to fine me? Take me to court? Go ahead. But when those rats start chewing through electrical wiring and nesting in your attics, you can explain to everyone why you pushed out the only effective pest deterrent on the block." Gregory recovered faster than I expected. "This isn't about rats," he snapped. "It's about order. Rules. You don't get to ignore them just because you have strange cats and a flair for drama." I smiled, leaning slightly toward the mic. "And yet," I said, "here I am, still not in compliance. And what exactly have you done about it?" That shut him up again. But it didn't end there. That night, I set my own camera on the back patio. I needed to know what the cats were doing when they weren't sleeping on my keyboard or sunbathing like lazy lions. What I captured made my skin crawl. At exactly midnight, the cats began to gather, not just mine, but others from the neighborhood. I counted at least 14. They formed that perfect circle again, each cat taking their position like it had been choreographed for centuries. This time, they weren't just staring upward. They were humming or purring, but not the usual kind. It had rhythm, cadence. They pulsed like a choir, vibrating through the patio wood, low and constant. The audio recorder picked up the same whispered phrase, only now it was louder. "The keeper is under protection." The next day, Miss Lynn brought me cookies and asked if she could donate to the cat cause. I told her there was no cause. She just smiled and said, "Well, they've stopped peeing on my begonias, so whatever you're doing, keep doing it." A week later, I found a hand-scrawled note shoved under my door. "Sorry I complained. I didn't know. Please don't send them back. No signature." I taped it to the fridge. At this point, I'd stopped trying to understand what the cats were. Maybe they were just cats. Maybe they were something more. I only knew one thing. Gregory hadn't given up. I could see it in the way he stared at me across the street, standing perfectly still at the edge of his lawn like he was daring me to blink first. But I wasn't blinking. He had no idea what was coming. There's a particular kind of silence that settles over a neighborhood when something is about to happen. It's not just quiet, it's hollow, like the air itself is holding its breath. That's how Willow Pines felt in the days leading up to the incident. Gregory stopped patrolling in his vest. He stopped walking his ridiculous leash-averse poodle. He even stopped responding to emails, which, for a man whose inbox was his personality, was practically a cry for help. But the warnings hadn't stopped. I kept getting letters, now in bold, all-caps, legalese-laced threats that danced dangerously close to harassment. The HOA board never voted. Gregory just declared things. Emergency executive authority, he claimed, for the safety and structural integrity of the community. Structural integrity? Jason scoffed when I showed him the latest one. Are they accusing the cats of chewing through load-bearing walls now? But even he looked nervous. He hadn't slept much since the humming incident. Then came the final notice, hand-delivered again. This time by not just Gregory, but 2 HOA board members, Marla and Jeff. And they weren't alone. They brought animal control. A white van pulled up outside my house at exactly 9 a.m. sharp. Jason texted me a single word, incoming. I watched from my window, coffee in hand, Clove curled around my shoulders like a scarf. Gregory stepped out first, adjusting his blazer like he was about to walk into a courtroom. Behind him, Marla looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. And Jeff, poor Jeff, was sweating through his shirt already. The animal control officers were clearly not briefed. 2 of them, both mid-20s, had the bored, gum-chewing expressions of guys who expected to spend their day wrangling stray chihuahuas, not enforcing HOA vendettas. Gregory marched to my front door and knocked 3 times, sharply. I didn't answer. Instead, I let the cats do it. They emerged one by one from the hedges, from under the porch, from the shadows at the side of the house. All 6 of mine first, Tinsel leading, her little red collar bell jingling like a warning. Then the others. At least a dozen cats now, forming a slow, deliberate line in front of my house. They sat perfectly still, perfectly silent. One of the animal control guys muttered, "What the?" Then the wind shifted. It came out of nowhere. A sudden, unnatural gust that rustled every tree on the street, but didn't move a single cat hair. And with it came the sound, low, rhythmic purring. Not from one cat, from all of them. A chorus, a vibration. The porch boards beneath them began to thrum like something ancient was waking up under the lawn. Gregory took a step forward. The purring grew louder. "Miss Rose," he shouted, "you are in direct violation of the Willow Pines Residential Covenant, Section 4.2.1b. We are here to enforce removal of excess animals." I opened the front door just a crack, enough for him to see my face, enough for my voice to carry. "You step 1 foot on this porch," I said, "and you break the protection." He blinked. "What protection?" Behind me, Taffy let out a hiss that sounded wrong. Too deep, too human. It echoed. One of the animal control officers backed up so fast he tripped over the curb. The other tried to open the van and nearly dropped his clipboard. They were done. Gregory wasn't. He charged. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. A grown man in a blazer trying to leap over a semicircle of cats like he was storming Normandy. He made it halfway up the walkway before everything stopped. And I mean everything. The wind, the sound, even time maybe. The cats all rose together. Every single one. Their eyes glowed. Actually glowed. Not some trick of the light. Pale green and cold. They didn't touch him. They didn't need to. Gregory froze mid-stride. His face contorted, not in fear, but in disbelief. like he'd finally realized he wasn't the one in control, and his brain simply couldn't compute it. He let out a single strangled sound, then he turned and ran, past the board members, past the van, past the neighborhood kids who had come out to see what the commotion was. He sprinted like the devil himself was clawing at his heels, arms flailing, voice cracking. He disappeared around the corner and was never seen again. Not by me, not by anyone. The official line was that he took a sudden leave of absence for personal reasons. His house was put up for sale a week later. No warning, no open house, just a quiet sign that appeared overnight and a locksmith changing the door code. Marla took over as interim president. The first thing she did was call an emergency meeting to review and revise outdated policies. The pet clause disappeared without a vote. Jason bought a scratching post the next day. For Bite, he said. Like that explained everything. But he started feeding the others too. And at night, if you looked out your window around midnight, you could still see the circle forming. The cats still gather. The purring still comes, sometimes louder, sometimes softer, but always in rhythm, always in protection. Of me, the keeper. They say people don't disappear anymore. But Gregory Topps did. The official story, such as it was, spread quickly and changed even faster. He had taken a sudden sabbatical, or needed time away for family matters, or had a minor nervous breakdown and was seeking professional help. The one thing every version had in common, nobody said the word cats. The real story, our story, never made it past the hedges of Willow Pines. Not because it wasn't talked about. It was. Whispered in backyards, muttered between sips of wine at book club, traded across driveways like smuggled goods. But every time someone got close to the truth, they'd stop mid-sentence, lower their voice, look over their shoulder. No one wanted to admit what they saw, because if you admit it, you have to live with it. Jason, for his part, was still trying to act like everything was normal. He brought over a bottle of Pinot Grigio and a bag of organic cat treats a few days after the incident. Bite trotted behind him like she'd lived here her whole life. So, he said after a long silence on my porch, we gonna talk about what happened? You mean the time the HOA president was spiritually sucker-punched by my cats and fled into the abyss? I said, sipping my tea. No, I think we let that one marinate. He exhaled, nodded. Good call. The very next day, the massive notice of violation sign that had once staked my yard like a scarlet letter vanished. No announcement. No removal crew. It was just gone. I didn't ask questions. Neither did anyone else. In the following weeks, there were a lot of changes. The HOA newsletter, once a monthly novella of petty rules and passive-aggressive reminders. Please remember, lawn flamingos are not considered appropriate holiday decor, was cut down to a single page. Marla, now acting president, claimed they were streamlining communications. Translation: they were scared to put anything in writing. The next meeting was awkward. No one dared mention Gregory. His name was scrubbed from the website, his photo removed from the HOA board wall like he was a disgraced dictator in an old regime. I half expected someone to hold up a redacted page and claim he never existed. But the energy had shifted. I could feel it in the way people looked at me. The sideways glances were still there, but they weren't judgmental anymore. They were reverent. People started waving first, bringing over baked goods, asking if I needed help changing porch lights or carrying groceries, even though I'd been perfectly capable before. It wasn't pity, it was respect. I had become something they didn't quite understand, but were smart enough not to cross. Even the HOA board was deferential. At the next meeting, when Marla politely asked if I had any updates or concerns, I said no, and she smiled like she'd just been pardoned. The only person who still looked nervous was Jeff, who refused to make eye contact with me and started referring to the cats as the guardians. I think it was half joke, half prayer. And the cats? They changed too. Not outwardly. They still lazed around all day, swatting dust motes and stealing my socks. But at night, their routines became more structured. The gatherings continued, always at midnight, always in a circle. Sometimes in my backyard, sometimes in the park. Once, unnervingly, in the exact center of the cul-de-sac. They'd sit for exactly 13 minutes, then disperse without a sound. The whisper, "The keeper is under protection," faded from the audio over time, but it was never really gone. It became more of a feeling. Like the air itself hummed with the warning. Like the wind had memorized the phrase. Jason and I set up new cameras, mostly for fun. We caught one video of Tinsel guiding a mouse, not chasing, guiding, into a storm drain like some tiny rodent escort. Another of Momo, staring down a raccoon twice his size until it waddled away like it owed him money. Miss Lynn began leaving out tuna. The rumors began again. Not whispered fears this time, superstitions. "They know who you are now," she told me one morning while watering her dahlias. "The cats. They've chosen you." I laughed, but she didn't. "I'm serious. Don't ever leave this neighborhood. Not without saying goodbye, not without permission." From who, I didn't ask. I started getting notes. Anonymous. Typed. Always unsigned. "Thank you. We're safe now. Tell them we're grateful." One was just a napkin with a drawing of 6 cats around a stick figure with a crown. It made me cry harder than I care to admit. And then there was Gregory's house. It sat empty, perfectly staged, fresh mulch, windows cleaned weekly, but no one ever came to see it. Not realtors, not buyers, not even a squirrel dared step on the welcome mat. It was as if the house itself had been excommunicated. People crossed the street rather than walk in front of it. Halloween decorations skipped it entirely. Kids wouldn't even trick-or-treat there. Someone tried to put a for sale sign back up, but it cracked in half overnight. Eventually, the house listing was pulled. Quietly, as if it had never been on the market. Jason called it neighborhood-level ghosting. I called it justice. So yes, Gregory vanished. But the bigger disappearance was this: fear. The HOA stopped terrorizing people. The flag size arguments? Gone. Lawn color citations? Vanished. Someone even painted their mailbox bright purple. And no one said a word. It was like the whole community collectively decided, you know what? Maybe a little chaos is okay if it keeps us alive. And me? I was still Sabrina Rose. Widow. Tea drinker. Crazy cat lady. But I was something else now, too. The keeper. And no one messed with the keeper. The quiet didn't come all at once. It settled over Willow Pines slowly, like a fog. A slow hush of bureaucratic nonsense dissolving under the weight of something older, something wiser, something feline. It started with the trash bins. 2 weeks after Gregory's vanishing act, the HOA finally replaced the overstuffed, rat-infested communal bins behind the clubhouse with new, sealed containers. Not because they wanted to, of course, but because I left a photo packet on Marla's doorstep. 12 high-resolution images of Clove with rat carcasses, time-stamped, GPS-tagged, and labeled, "Your only pest control strategy." The bins were replaced within 48 hours. Lawn violations? Gone. Noise complaints? Laughed off. A guy down the street installed a wind-powered sculpture that howled like a dying saxophone every night, and no one batted an eye. They knew better. One of the houses on Cedar Court threw a party that went until 3 a.m. with a live mariachi band. The HOA didn't say a word. Why? Because half the cats had fallen asleep on the band's equipment mid-set, and everyone instinctively knew better than to disturb them. Something had shifted, not just in the bylaws, But in the air, the HOA still technically existed. Marla, to her credit, did her best. But meetings became more like community potlucks. People brought casseroles. Jason set up a projector for security cam reviews, which mostly turned into showings of the latest midnight cat footage. One meeting featured a PowerPoint titled, Tinsel's Most Intimidating Glares, a data-backed retrospective. The crowd loved it. Jason eventually installed a custom cat door, and Bite officially moved in. He tried to get a second cat, went to a shelter, and came home with a fat orange tabby named Pascal. Pascal looked like a melon in fur. But within 2 weeks, he was part of the circle. They accepted him. I swear the other cats tested him first, like an interview process. Clove chased him in circles for a day straight. Edgar knocked over a full stack of books to see if he'd react. Taffy licked him exactly 3 times, then walked away. Whatever it was, he passed. Miss Lynn started a Facebook group. Willow Pines, Watch Cats. The banner image? The circle. Not everyone knew the details, but everyone respected the order. And every now and then, when someone got too bold, say, when Jeff tried to reintroduce a noise curfew policy, he'd find a neat line of paw prints across his car windshield the next morning. No scratches, just prints. A message. He pulled the policy within the hour. As for Gregory's house, it still stood. Untouched. Unbought. The grass never grew. No leaves ever gathered on the porch. It was like the cats took turns guarding it, watching, making sure no one tried to re-enter what had been claimed. A realtor came once. Only once. She walked out 5 minutes later, face pale, muttering something about unplaceable smells and walls that hum. We don't talk about the house anymore. And me? I still live in lot 47. Same porch, same tea, same 6 cats, plus a rotating cast of strays and rescues that show up at odd hours and leave just as mysteriously. People ask me sometimes if I'm scared. Of what I saw. Of what the cats are. I'm not. They're family. Maybe a little supernatural, maybe a little sacred, maybe something entirely unknowable. But still mine. They curl beside me at night. They purr when I read aloud. They keep watch when I'm sick. And they gather around when I cry like they know exactly why. Sometimes, when the wind is right, I still hear it. The keeper is under protection, and I believe it. I don't know what made them choose me. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was kindness. Maybe it was just that they could. But they did. And in return, I protect them too. I stopped answering HOA mail altogether. I let the wind sort it out. The cats have their circle. I have mine. And peace here is not maintained by a gavel or a newsletter. It's kept by watchful eyes, soft paws, and an ancient pact older than any neighborhood covenant. So if you're thinking of moving to Willow Pines, bring snacks. Be kind. And whatever you do, don't touch the cats.